Hold on to your seat, slappers. It's the Michael Welch Podcast. College football, week 6 and 50 days, consecutive days of football.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings. I need my blessings every penny, daily counting every single one I'm seeing plenty.
Yes, week 6. Had to check my numbers there. Week 6 of the college football season. Week 5 of the NFL season coming up here. Now, let's see, October 4th, I believe it is, will be the day 1 of 50 consecutive days with football in some form on television between the NFL and its Monday and Thursday night games, of course, and college football with Conference USA and MAC games being played throughout the week. You'll have already watched the Wednesday games with Middle Tennessee falling at home to Jacksonville State, 45-30. Jacksonville State moving to 5-1 and 3-0 in Conference USA play. A big win for them there after falling 23-7 at the half, coming back and rallying to win that one. And New Mexico State under Jerry Kill, I think it's his third year there. They are 3-3 overall, 1-1 in Conference USA play after beating Florida International, who falls to 3-3 overall, 0-3 in conference play after a nice start. So it's unfortunate there for the Panthers, I believe, of FIU, and a nice win there for Kill. But let's rewind to some of the highlights. Last Friday, we had a big game. Oregon State knocking off Utah 21-7. The Utah Utes couldn't do a lot in this game. They scored a touchdown late. As expected, well, maybe not expected, but defensive battle. Utah's offense just absolutely struggling here. They're on a bye week this week. Cam Rising, there we go. Expected to hopefully be back. It's been a mystery this whole year, and of course now we're almost halfway through. Horrible, really. Nate Johnson was in, struggled a little bit, was hurt and banged up. Bryson Barnes came in, and he was the original number 3 on the depth chart. He was rocked pretty good. Possible concussion. Nate Johnson came back in, was hurt again, but hung in the game and was constantly getting pressured. Let's see here. Oregon State officially logged 4 sacks, 5 tackles for losses. It sure looked like more than that. Johnson finished 9 for 23 passing. Barnes finished 5 for 8. Rough time. 13 for 31 overall for Utah. Just not able to get much going in this game. Not very surprising. And again, it's hard to see Cam Rising just walking back and just lighting up this offense and making all the gears click, especially with his time off. So Utah really having some problems, I think, moving forward. 2 for 13 on third down conversions on last Friday, 198 yards. Oregon State, again, Utah's defense very good. They were 4 for 13 converting at 358 yards. They also had 11 penalties for over 100 yards. That was not a good look. DJ Ungalele did not look super spectacular again. He was 14 for 25 for 204, a touchdown and a pick, but he has not been top flight quarterback material. Certainly not a bad quarterback. You know, when you have bad quarterbacks or quarterbacks don't really make a difference, but certainly not a superstar since leaving Clemson. We'll see how he does moving forward in conference play, but a nice big win for Oregon State, who rushed the field afterwards there at home on Friday night. Let's see, Louisville also won 13-10 over NC State to stay undefeated. They're just not a very good football team. They're just not. But NC State, again, they dropped to 3-2 overall. That offense is just horrific. Brendan Armstrong, 13 for 25, passing for 112 yards and 2 interceptions. He counted for 61 rushing yards, and the team still finished with under 100. Just miserable times there at NC State, and we'll go over their game in a few moments here. Jack Plummer again, former Purdue Boilermaker, then California Bear, now, of course, the Louisville Cardinals there. He had a couple picks, 25 for 35 passing, but got the job done for the Louisville Cardinals on the road there in Wolfpack land. 20 penalties and 6 turnovers in this game. 4 for 14 on third down was Louisville. 3 for 15 for NC State. Just disgusting. Just disgusting football game. And Louisville has Notre Dame this week. We'll see. BYU also beat Cincinnati to move to 4-1 overall. 35-27 was the final there. Actually, a little bit better showing for Emory Jones, who himself has transferred twice. Florida, Arizona State. Now it's Cincinnati, but not able to get the win there. He had 3 touchdowns passing, 256 yards, 23 for 37, and 94 yards on the ground. And still can't get it done for Cincinnati there. And Slovis, the former USC Trojan. And wasn't he somewhere else? Losing track now. And at BYU, 223 yards, couple touchdowns for BYU as they were able to hold on at home there and get the win over the Bearcats. If you're looking at the Big 12 standings right now, and again, no one has played more than a couple games, so Oklahoma's 2-0, Texas is 2-0, West Virginia's 2-0, Kansas State's 1-0. But as far as overall records here, Oklahoma and Texas are obviously undefeated. West Virginia is a stunning 4-1, thought to be not a bowl team this year. Maybe their coach would get the hook. Kansas State is 3-1 overall. Kansas is 4-1 and looking pretty strong overall. The defense has finally taken a little step, even though Jaden Daniels there is questionable at quarterback from week to week, but Jason being the backup has been productive in his absence. BYU now 4-1, so tied there for the second best record in the Big 12. After that, you have TCU at 3-2, Baylor's 2-3, Iowa State's 2-3, Texas Tech is a disappointing 2-3 after the offense was thought to be making a lot of productive moves, a good quarterback coming back, pieces like that, even if the defense wasn't making a big step after being productive last year. Then you got Oklahoma State 2-2 after a lot of transfers out, UCF at 3-2, they've had some quarterback injuries there, and then Cincinnati, Houston at 2-3 apiece. So again, 5 games into the season, no one's winless or sitting at 1 win, but just a lot of mediocrity. Ooh, sitting there in the Big 12 with Oklahoma and Texas playing this week, sitting at the tippy top. So it's kind of surprising to see BYU at 4-1. So we'll see throughout conference play what kind of middle tier develops there in the Big 12. Now, as far as Saturday is actually concerned, Auburn held court pretty good at home, eventually falling 27-20 to Georgia. A lot of damage done on the ground at the quarterback position. Peyton Thorne, the former Spartan, doing a lot of running on the ground. Not a lot of passing again. Fewer than 100 yards passing, which is a horrible stat, but been the token for the Auburn Tigers. He got 92 yards rushing, though, as they went for just over 200 total on the game for the Auburn Tigers. And they kept it close. They forced a couple of turnovers as well. Carson Beck for Georgia finished 23 for 33 for 313, a touchdown and a pick. He did get a touchdown drive together at the end and a pass to Brock Bowers, who finished 8 catches, 157 yards, and a touchdown. He isn't currently the most prolific tight end so far this year in college football. That belongs to one of the tight ends at Texas, who's a little banged up right now. We'll see if he'll be back for the Red River rivalry. He's questionable this upcoming weekend, but that doesn't mean he isn't one of the best playmakers overall still in the college game. He just hasn't been needed as much. But again, Carson Beck still, just like some of the other quarterback positions at the higher spots here, you know, we have to see how productive he's going to be. I think a lot of the folks came out pretty optimistic that Georgia faced a difficult environment and a difficult defense on the road, and still didn't really break a sweat. You never really felt like they were going to lose. Auburn's offense was never really threatening. Just thought, a couple turnovers really hurt them, but still, winning by 1 score against a team that might finish, 5th out of 7 teams in the SEC West Division is just not a good look, if you ask me. They were still 8 for 13 on third down, 9.5 yards a pass was good, only 3 penalties, but need to be sharper. Michigan houses Nebraska 45-7. The Huskers switched quarterbacks there. Heinrich Harburg did not play very well. The defense didn't do much to stop Michigan. They had over almost 250 yards on the ground. J.J. McCarthy did what he needed to, 12 for 16 for 156 and a couple touchdowns. A bunch of guys got in a quarterback. A bunch of running backs got in. Just a lot of Michigan. And I believe they covered a spread, finally. Texas had no problems with Kansas, but Jaden Daniels was a late scratch. Back issues, I believe. So Jason Bean was in. I believe I said once on this podcast that there's not much of a drop-off between Jason Daniels and Jason Bean. What I really meant, and I can't believe I left this in the podcast at the time, was when you are kind of a long shot anyways, I don't know that it's that much of a difference. And that was more of last year. Obviously, Jaden Daniels is a tremendous difference. The defense was really struggling. He is much better with his legs. He's a little bit better thrower. This year, the defense is better for Kansas. He is performing at a better level. And it's starting to show the edges on slightly better improvements at quarterback, what he's able to add at quarterback, and then the defense, you start to see the drop-off specifically at the quarterback position when your defense can stop people, and you need little plays here and there at the quarterback position. Jason Bean was 9 for 21 for 136 yards and a touchdown. Your quarterback, Neal, had 45 yards on the ground. He's excellent. Bean actually ran for 42 yards as well. But Texas didn't have a lot of problems here. Ewers was 25 for 35 for 325 yards, a touchdown and a pick. He also ran for a couple touchdowns as well. O'Donnell Mitchell, 10 catches for 141 yards and a touchdown. Xavier Worthy also had 7 for 93 yards. And Texas just rolled up 660 yards of offense. Almost doubled up, almost not quite tripled up, certainly more than doubled up Kansas. 9 for 15 on third down. Kansas was 0 for 8, and Texas just ran them over. 40-14 was the final that dropped Kansas out of the rankings, but they're still 4-1 overall, so that's something. Penn State smushed Northwestern 41-13. Washington survived Arizona 31-24. Michael Penix, no touchdown passes, so that was a win for Arizona. He was still 30 for 40 for 363, 9.1 yards per pass attempt. Again, one of the best deep ball throwers, average yards per throw in the college football game. He's third in the country right now, just behind Jalen Raynor of Arkansas State and Caleb Williams of USC at 11.2 yards per attempt. Caleb's at 11.4. Raynor for Arkansas State's at 13.3, so he's got quite a jump up there. Actually, Michael Pratt for Tulane, just for reference, is at 11 yards at number 4. And next on the list at 10.7 yards per completion, we actually have Jaden Milroe of Alabama once he gets the ball out. Jaden Daniels of LSU, who's not really known for thrower, but he's looked pretty good this year. And Jack Plummer out of Louisville, who we were just discussing. So those are your top guys at yards per passing attempt. And Michael Penix is also leading the country in passing yards at the moment at 1,999. He's a healthy 200 yards plus ahead of Shedeur Sanders. And he's also completing just under 75% of his passes, which puts him in the top 10. Currently, yes, top 10. He's tied for, 7th place, something like that. So he's still way up there. A true freshman, I believe, Noah Fatata, I can't do names, started for Arizona with Jaden Delora out, injured. He threw for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception as well. And Arizona was able to move the ball a bit on Washington. They were 5 for 13 on third down, which is not awfully atrocious, all things considered. They had 27 first downs. They were 3 for 4 on fourth down, 342 yards altogether. Didn't average great yardage per play, but still 8 penalties and a turnover, and they're still in the thick of it. Washington was 6 for 10 on third downs, 474 yards. 12 penalties, though, for 125 yards and a turnover. And again, is this just a little blip on the road against a decent Arizona team, although with a backup quarterback? Or will they have some problems moving forward? We'll see in the car crash that is the Pac-12. USC 48-41 against Colorado. It was not really that close. The defense clearly has problems, but Colorado scored one late, did not get the onside kick. And that was the end of it. And didn't seem to be any worries that they'd actually lose the game after the comments on the field afterwards. Didn't seem to be real concerns at all from USC. But Caleb Williams, 30 for 40, 403 yards, and 6 touchdowns with 1 interception. Brandon Rice caught a couple of those touchdown balls at over 16 yards per reception. Over 14 yards per reception, 8 grabs for 117 for Taj Washington. Mario Williams had a touchdown. Just elite passing game there. And Sador Sanders, 30 for 45, 371, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. Again, they were able to certainly move the ball at times. They were 9 for 18 on third down, put the drive together at the end. They had 564 yards to 498 for USC. The Trojans themselves only faced half as many third downs. They were 3 for 9 on third down, just didn't face as many and were able to move the ball down the field in a 34-14 halftime lead, and they were just able to hang out at the end there. So USC is now 5-0. Colorado is now 3-2. Oregon 42-6 over Stanford. I watched highlights of this. Again, they've had a lot of games to get up for. Oregon has playing at Texas Tech, of course, playing Colorado. I believe they're on bye this week, and then they've got Washington State, and Utah coming up next. Duke was able to, Duke fell to Notre Dame, is what I should say. Riley Leonard got hurt on, I believe it was the last play of the game, so he might have problems moving forward, certainly look like it, so Duke could drop some more games potentially. That was not good at all. Notre Dame, again, leaning on Esme, the running back there. I think he's one of the leading rushers in the country. Is the leading rusher in the country. He averaged 4.5 yards per carry in this game, had a couple of touchdowns. Sam Hartman was ugly again, 15 for 30 for 222, but I think you're going to see that in some of these better games. It's not that he doesn't have receiving weapons. I just think that they're going to have better success on the ground. Mitchell Evans, 6 for 134, one of their better weapons. Chris Tyree has gotten in on some of the action too, I believe, there. But Mitchell Evans, one of their tight ends there. Chris Tyree, one of their receivers. And the ground game is going to be their strength. Defensively, they did a pretty good job on Duke. Riley Leonard, 12 for 27 for 134, a touchdown and a pick, and he does damage on the ground. 18 carries for 88 yards and 4.9 yards per carry. That's what he's going to do to you. Duke just kind of screwed around and punted the ball back to Notre Dame in a tie game with 5.5 to play, I guess, and that was really just the wrong choice. Close game and just a defensive battle, but allowing Notre Dame to control the clock as they wanted to do and go down to punch in a last-minute touchdown was just, I think, a mistake. Different play calls could have been made, and I just think Duke kind of made a mistake in how they handled the last real drive that they had, the last real opportunity before fumbling it away and losing Leonard at the end of the game, unfortunately. Mississippi State was beaten up by Alabama 40-17. Again, Milroe, not awesome. 164 yards passing, but 69 yards and 2 touchdowns rushing. That's what he's going to do this season. However, 10 for 12 on those passing attempts, 13.7 yards per attempt, and that's the damage that he's going to do. Neil Black had a 23-yard reception. Benson had a 27-yard reception. Dearby had a 26-yard reception. That's what Alabama is going to do, is hit some of those more explosive passes as Milroe pitches it downfield when he finally gets the ball out. And the Tide had almost 3 times as many carries as they did passing attempts. I didn't go back to see how many rushes by Milroe were actually dropbacks that turned into scrambles, but it was at least twice as many planned runs as there were passes at a minimum. Will Rogers, 15 for 27 passing, just over 100 yards, a touchdown, 3 picks, 4 yards per passing attempt, over 30 rushing attempts by Mississippi as they continue to bury this offense in rushing attempts and not use their great quarterback wisely. They're just going in the toilet. They're 2-3 right now, and it could still get much, much worse. Just a horrible, horrible job, really. Ole Miss and LSU. Hope you took the over in this one. We had, let me see here. We had at least 2 touchdowns in every single quarter. 55-49, Ole Miss won at home, rushed the field. Very exciting. So LSU's 3-2 now. Ole Miss is now 4-1. All kinds of offensive numbers popping off all over. But the point is, LSU's great defensive front can't do a whole lot when you can throw the ball all over their ass end and they can't stop anything. 0 sacks, 6 tackles for loss. Ole Miss threw for 389 yards. They did run for another 300 and something, so you take that for what it is. Overall, Ole Miss had 706 yards of offense. Now, to their credit, LSU had 637, so this goes both ways. But of course, LSU is the defending West Division champion there of the SEC. And Ole Miss was not as much as expected from Ole Miss. 11 penalties for 121 yards for Ole Miss. Only 1 turnover. That was on the LSU side. Both teams averaging over 6 yards per rush and over 10 yards per passing attempt. Both converting over 50% on 3rd down. Just an insane game all the way through. 4 touchdowns a piece for each quarterback. The box score is just wild. And these are the kind of games I guess these two will continue to play. Got to continue to try and execute on offense because the defense isn't going to stop much of anybody. But the SEC in general, I don't know what offenses you're terribly afraid of. Texas A&M and Alabama this week is going to be a big deal. Texas A&M playing with a backup quarterback that's still capable of an above-average baseline. Max Johnson, former LSU backup, in line to be a starter at one point. Things got shuffled around when Brian Kelly came in and picked Jay Daniels as a starter. Max Johnson now in at starter for Texas A&M after the Connor Wingman injury. So he can still be a real asset there, but obviously Alabama's having troubles on offense. Auburn is not passing. Arkansas's got issues. Mississippi State's not using its personnel. Georgia is Georgia. Kentucky's one of the best explosive play teams in the country, although they can't hit much of anything underneath. Missouri is having a decent job throwing the football around. Florida's got problems. Tennessee is okay. I'm not particularly high on Tennessee. South Carolina, if you can get pressure on Spencer Rattler, has not a lot going for it. And Vanderbilt's Vanderbilt. So we can still see some high-scoring games when these two are involved. But these might be 2 of the better executing offenses overall. Certainly 2 of the top 5 in the SEC. Oklahoma smashed Iowa State 50-20. Did not see that coming, but sets up a very interesting Red River rivalry. Iowa State, even in years where they're struggling, they've struggled offensively under Matt Campbell there, but the defense usually keeps things pretty close. They had a very good wide receiver last year. Let's say it was Xavier Hutchinson, who was a really big target for them, but things are really not so hot this year, at least initially. So we'll see what happens with Iowa if they're able to hang in some of these games. Again, the Big 12, a lot of question marks about who's going to separate for the middle tier. Again, it looks like Texas and Oklahoma at the top, and then a whole lot of question marks. And we'll see where Iowa State settles. But Oklahoma and Texas are setting up for big Triple R game coming up here. Tennessee 41-20 over South Carolina. That's what they probably should do over that team. 2 picks by Joe Milton, 1 touchdown, 21 for 32 passing, but they run the ball a lot. 238 yards, that includes sack yardage, about 240 yards altogether there. And the defense, 6 sacks and 8 tackles for loss. Spencer Rattler just couldn't get it going. Less than 170 yards passing there. Kentucky smashed Florida. Florida seems to be more problematic than initially thought. Of course, they lost to Utah initially, picked it up there, winning a couple games, and now I don't know. No one seems to know. Ground game was non-existent again, lost less than 70 yards on the ground. Mertz was 25 for 30 for 244 and a couple touchdowns, but they just got absolutely bodied. And Devin Leary was 9 for 19 for 69 yards and a touchdown. That's all he needed to do. Over 300 yards on the ground for Kentucky. Ray Davis, 26 carries, 280, over 10 yards, almost 11 yards per attempt on 26 carries, and he had 3 touchdowns. That's insane. He was just ripping through the Gators, ripping them apart. 9 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. Florida's offense has some real freaking problems all over the place. Missouri's 5-0. They beat Vanderbilt 38-21. Cook, 395 yards passing and 4 touchdowns. He's got a big game coming up this week. Fresno moves to 5-0 after a 27-9 win over Nevada. Texas A&M wins another one. They win at Arkansas 34-22. Max Johnson, 210, 2 touchdowns and a pick. He'll do just fine there. Texas A&M, I think. They also have about 200 yards on the ground as well there. 7 sacks, 15 tackles for losses. Just constantly putting pressure on KJ Jefferson there for the Razor Hogs. And I think they had less than 200 yards of total offense. 174 yards of offense for Arkansas, 414 for Texas A&M, who still managed to have 3 turnovers versus 1 for Arkansas, and they beat them. So Tulane 4-1, 35-23 over UAB. Steady hanging in the American there while they're healthy. Again, their only loss was at home to Ole Miss with a Michael Pratt injury. Clemson slowly, quietly picked up a win over Syracuse, 31-14. Syracuse has got a billion injuries to the wide receiver position. I thought this would be pretty close. I guess in some respects, a 17-point loss is close. Some years it's closer. It was 21-7 at the half, though, in a sloppy, sloggy second half of the game. Not quite the offensive totals you'd expect here compared to some of the other games. 281 yards for Syracuse, but 3 turnovers, 9 penalties. Clemson had 381, 6 penalties and a turnover, and was just able to pick up a win there. And I think that about wraps some of the super highlight games. Georgia Tech dropped down at home to Bowling Green, 38-27. That was a big loss. And Heinz King, the Texas A&M transfer, still had 348 yards and 4 touchdowns. That is a humiliating loss. And that's not a week 1 or 2 figuring things out. That is almost halfway through the year taking a big hit. Iowa beat Michigan State 26-16. McCarthy was banged up. West Virginia moved to 4-1 and dropped TCU to 3-2 with a 24-21 win there. All right, so your games for Wednesday will be wrapped already by the time you listen to this week's TV guide. New Mexico State over Florida International, Middle Tennessee over Jacksonville State. Liberty will presumably come out ahead of Sam Houston to take a 3-0 conference lead on Conference USA and move to 5-0. But Sam Houston has been a little feisty despite the fact that they haven't won a game yet this season. Lost 14-0 on the road at BYU. Lost a 10-point game to a very good Air Force team. Was blown out by Houston and lost a close one to Jacksonville State, a game that they led at 1 point. And playing at Liberty here, again, could be interesting to start out with, but presumably Liberty the Flames pull out ahead here, and they're in the driver's seat for Conference USA, at least at the moment. The Flames come in scoring 40 points per game, converting almost 49% on third down. The quarterback position isn't anything particularly interesting. They do get a lot of damage in on the ground on the offensive side of things, almost 6 yards per carry. And I think the defense is okay. But that's your lead in the Conference USA right now. And Louisiana Tech will be hosting Western Kentucky, who's favorited by a decent margin in that one. Austin Reed at quarterback, putting some decent numbers on the board for Western Kentucky on ESPN. Your Friday games, couple Power 5 matchups going on Friday. 7:30 on ESPN. Oklahoma State is 2-2. They're hosting Kansas State, who is 3-1. Kansas State favored comfortably here. Both teams coming off a bye, so you can't say that Oklahoma State is particularly favored to come in this matchup at home. Kansas State last thumped Central Florida 44-31. Wins over Troy and Southeast Missouri. They did lose the strange game on the road at Mizzou on the penalty and late field goal that really bumped them out of the rankings, that they have not quite recovered there yet. Still a team that could win a Big 12 title, even though they haven't been spoken about since that loss. They're putting up 44 points per game. They're converting 54% on third downs, 50% on their fourth down attempts. The defense is still looking pretty good as well. I think they've got a decent running back there that's replaced Deuce Vaughn by the name of DJ Giddens, who's taken a bulk of the carries, averaging 6.4 yards on 66 carries so far this year on the ground. And Will Howard seems to be doing a good job there since taking over the starting position coming into the season. They've also found themselves a pretty good defensive end there in Khaled Duke, who has 4 sacks in 4 games so far, and it seems like they'll still be in the hunt here in the Big 12, despite the fact that they're not being discussed right now. And Oklahoma State trying to hold on there. Things aren't looking so great for Mike Gundy and his operation right now. Oklahoma State not looking so hot. Of course, losses to South Alabama at home, 33-7, and then the loss to Iowa State heading into the bye, 34-27. They beat Arizona State ugly and Central Arkansas by 14. Not looking good there for Oklahoma State. The second game, 8 o'clock FS1, is a 2-3 Illinois team hosting a 2-3 Nebraska team. These are not very good teams in the Big Ten. Both fighting for bowl games, quite frankly, at this point. Nebraska hoping their defense comes along. New quarterback under center there. And Illinois is just struggling. Of course, the 2 cornerbacks went to the NFL last year. And Luke Altmaier having trouble. 5 touchdowns, 7 picks. Offensive line isn't as good. They got problems all over the place. Both teams do. But that will be the Friday night 8 o'clock game. So let's move on to Saturday, October 7th. Your first slate of games in the noon window is highlighted by your top watch, and that is the Red River Rivalry. Oh, we got it all out that time. Oklahoma's currently ranked 12th. They're playing at number 3 Texas. This is on ABC. Not a lot of movement in the top half of the rankings this coming into this week. But Texas will be hosting, well, it's a neutral site game, but Texas and Oklahoma just announced Baker Mayfield would be the guest picker for this particular game. Seems like an interesting choice. Had a lot of options on the board, but that's who they'll be going with. The noon window altogether only has 8 games. 5 top 25 teams will be playing, and there's 2 top 25 matchups. The other one is number 20 LSU heading on the road to number 21 Missouri on ESPN. But that is clearly a backseat to Oklahoma and Texas. Of course, Texas, if you're listening to other programs, perhaps the best team in college football. Other than the late rally to beat Wyoming, where they kind of played around for 3 quarters and put 3 scores on the board late to win by that margin, Texas is looking great on both sides of the football, both sides of the trenches. Wide receiver position, they do have a few injuries, including their stud tight end there, Jatavion Sanders. He's questionable, and the corner, Ryan Watts. So a couple of key players there. Pardon me, it was just announced in the last couple hours here, Jatavion Sanders is scheduled in to play. So there we go. Ryan Watts is day-to-day. So much better for receiving options for Ewers there. But Texas has looked great. Of course, we took them seriously when they won in Tuscaloosa 34-24. They beat Baylor 36-8, just stifled them. They beat Kansas 40-14, Wyoming 31-10, Rice 37-10. But this is just a really good football team all over the place right now. Only giving up 12.8 points per game. You can make arguments against the offenses that they're playing, but you can nitpick in a lot of things. Point is, they've beaten Alabama, regardless of what you think of them, and Kansas as well. Oklahoma will certainly be the best offense they've played so far, so just keep that in mind if this tends to push towards a higher scoring game. It doesn't necessarily indicate that the defense isn't good, it's just that this is a more potent Oklahoma offense. On the flip side of things, Oklahoma, they played Arkansas State, who they beat 73-0, SMU 28-11, Tulsa 66-17, Cincinnati 20-6, and of course laid it up on Iowa State 50-20 last week. And this is a team struggled last year and is able to kind of put the pieces together so far this season. They are putting up 47.4 points per game. That's third in the country, 352 passing yards, all put through the air there. Dylan Gabriel doing a great job. They're only giving up 10.8 points per game, if you want to go strictly on those surface level numbers. But Dylan Gabriel, almost 1,600 yards on the season, 75% completion percentage, over 10 yards per throw, 15 touchdowns, a couple picks. I'm not sure if they've really chiseled out a true running back to take over for Eric Gray, who left last season. Marcus Major is taking a bulk of the carries, but it's not by a massive margin. Tawi Walker is actually averaging more yards per carry at 5.1 than Major is. And they have some weapons at receiver as well. And Andrell Anthony averaging almost 18 yards per catch. Joel Forquo, who's averaging 19 yards per reception. And Nick Anderson, who's only got 10 grabs, but for 27 plus yards per reception and 5 touchdowns as well, leading the team. And they've looked excellent, quite frankly. When they've played, Cincinnati did manage to slow them down a little bit, where you first had questions. But every team this year has had problems against at least one team on the schedule. Gabriel's being protected pretty well, as well by his offensive line. Now, Texas, on the flip side of things, they're doing a great job executing as well. The defense is playing excellent, much better than they were last year. As you remember, they had problems on the back end, certainly. Xavier Worthy's been a great receiver. Adonal Mitchell has stepped in as well to be arguably the number 2. He's had his moments as the number 1 as well. Sanders, I believe, is the leader in yardage for tight ends at 278. And although they don't have the massive third down conversion rate at over 50% like Oklahoma does, theirs is closer to 42%. They are 7 for 10 on fourth down. They've also played a much more difficult schedule relative to Oklahoma as well. And this will just be a great game. We don't really know how these two will match up against each other. The over-under on this one is sitting at 60.5 that I'm looking at right now. Texas is a 5-point favorite at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas here, and this could go any number of which ways. We could see a lot of points. We could see a little bit more defense. We could see Texas run away with it. We could see Oklahoma hang in and maybe pull an upset. That would be a little surprising so far with what we've seen and how Texas has built and developed over Steve Sarkisian's past few years here, and Brent Venables just in year 2 here, of course, working on his squad. So big game, noon, ABC, Texas and Oklahoma, obviously probably the number 1 watch here on the slate. Moving on to LSU, and it's kind of amazing they are still ranked. They have played a very difficult schedule, but my goodness, they can't stop anyone in the back end on that secondary, one of the worst pass defenses in the entire country, and they're playing a team that is so far passing to win in Missouri. Now, LSU's favored by 4 points so far. It's a 65-point over-under. There's expected to be nothing but points in this particular ball game. Jaden Daniels doing a great job chucking it around after not really being considered a great passer his last couple years in college football. And on the flip side, for Missouri, they have wins over South Dakota, Middle Tennessee. Kansas State was a big one. Memphis is decent, and they beat Vanderbilt last week. But Brady Cook right now, 1,468 passing yards, 74.5% completion, decent yardage, 10.4. That's good. That's good. Not one of these 7-yard averages. 11 touchdowns, 0 interceptions so far this season. The lead running back, Cody Schroeder, is averaging 5.7 yards per carry. And the other guy getting a lot of totes as well is averaging 4.6. We've got some good receivers. Luther Burden III, averaging 15 yards per reception on 43 grabs. He's got 5 touchdowns. He's the main man out there. So he's got some weapons. He's got some running backs. I think the offensive line is decent from the pieces of Missouri games that I've watched. And Missouri has had some top 20 defenses over the years, recently, in recent memory. And I think this is another pretty good group. Johnny Walker Jr. on the defensive line. It looks like a solid guy. He's got a few of their sacks, their sack leader currently. And I think this is a pretty okay unit. Now, can they stop a offensive juggernaut in LSU? Again, Jaden Daniels completing 73% of his passes, 16 passing touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He's also ran for 3 touchdowns. The second leading rusher behind Logan Diggs for LSU. And great receivers there. And Malik Neighbors, of course, Brian Thomas Jr. and Karen Lacey, who's only got a couple grabs, but he's been productive as well. So can Missouri keep up with LSU? It certainly seems like they can. They're at home. It seems to be a dangerous place for teams to go right now. It certainly seems like upset potential for LSU, who could all of a sudden find themselves at 3-3 halfway through the season. So keep an eye on that in Columbia, Missouri. Personally, I would lean Texas to beat Oklahoma in a high-scoring affair by a couple scores. And Missouri, I certainly like Missouri, maybe to win by another field goal. So we might have another couple high-scoring games here in the noon window. But those are my 2 top watches in the noon window. Couple channel flippers, only 2 there, and 1 notable game with the slate being so thin. Number 4, Ohio State will be hosting Maryland. 2 undefeated teams, keep in mind, on Fox. Now, Ohio State's favored by almost 3 scores in this one, which seems a little crazy. Now, Maryland was a thorn in the side of many teams last year, despite the fact that they couldn't knock down any of the big names in the Big Ten. But perhaps they've lost some talent this past season, and that's perhaps why they're playing Charlotte closer than they should. They did end up blowing out Michigan State and Towson and Virginia, as they should. It seems like they gave up a few too many points to Indiana, but blew them out. But they'll have to keep an eye on Ohio State. A bye week might have been really necessary to kind of get that offense clicking. It still wasn't working quite right. Kyle McCord will be back in, though. 65% completion, 6 touchdowns and a pick so far on the season. Kept pretty clean in that pocket. Again, several running backs, but Trevion Henderson has again grabbed the reins as the main running back this season. 6.7 yard average, 5 touchdowns in 4 games already this year, but it's been a little sluggish at times. Certainly sluggish against Notre Dame, which is no slouch. Struggled against Indiana, which has a pretty good defense, but it's also still Indiana. 35 points against Youngstown State. Finally put some points up against Western Kentucky, but it hasn't been all roses for Ohio State. Will they be able to put up points against Maryland? I'm thinking yes, but will Maryland, highlighted of course by Tulia Tagovailoa, 13 touchdowns, 3 picks, 65% completion rating on his own. Will he be able to move the ball on the other side? Almost 50% conversion on third down so far for this particular squad. Ohio State, again, expected to win. That should be the case, but keep an eye on Ohio State and Maryland. And Wisconsin will be hosting Rutgers on Peacock. These teams also both coming off bye, if I'm not mistaken. A lot of Big Ten teams on bye last week. Wisconsin's still putting stuff together, man. If things kind of form, they should actually win the Big Ten, is that the East Division? Whatever division that is over there. And, that's just such a hodgepodge with Illinois not being as good this year. Purdue struggles. Iowa's offense looking atrocious. The loss to Washington State was rough. Wins over Buffalo, Georgia Southern, Purdue so far comfortably, but still trying to find footing against better teams. Mordecai, 66% completion, 2 touchdowns, 3 picks. That's horrible. Ground game, you have a lot of weapons. Braylon Allen, 7.1 yards per carry. Maluzzi, 6 yards a carry. And Mordecai's actually got 4 touchdowns on the ground. So they can still build around that piece, hopefully open up the passing attack a little bit there. But a lot more to be seen from Wisconsin, I think, on both sides of the ball. Hopefully the off week helped them out. Rutgers is actually very good. The ground game is their 28th in rushing yards. Quarterback position still isn't anything special as you'd expect. The defense seems to be pretty okay. They don't turn the ball over a whole lot, and they've been in the game against several football teams. So outside of eventually getting thumped at Michigan, this team has been pretty good and wins over Virginia Tech, Temple, Northwestern, and Wagoner. All blowout victories. So keep that in mind. Going to Madison will be a different occasion. This could be a low-scoring slugfest, but still interesting that 2 teams, they're kind of middle level right now, Big Ten teams. And lastly, the notable game, SEC Network will have Mississippi State, favored by 20 points, hosting Western Michigan. And I'm not sure why these 2 teams are playing on like week 6. Western Michigan going to Mississippi, I don't know. But Mississippi State has just looked bad. I don't know what the hell they're doing with their roster, play calling. Western Michigan isn't particularly good. They were crushed by Syracuse. Iowa on the road at Toledo was a good MAC team. They beat Ball State last week, and they beat St. Francis in their opener. But this should be another blowout for Mississippi State. I just wouldn't be too shocked if some weird stuff happens and you see at some point that Mississippi State is struggling against a team that they shouldn't. But I mean, Western Michigan's played multiple quarterbacks and had their fair share of issues, certainly, but it just feels like a weird game in a weird spot for Mississippi State. Not even favored by 3 touchdowns right now. So just something to note. The afternoon slate has 2 top games, 2 top billings on it, and it goes like this. CBS, Texas A&M, unranked, hosting number 11 Alabama at 3:30. Bama, 2.5-point favorites on the road. One of the best defenses in the country right now, not to be underrated, are the Alabama Crimson Tide. Slowly starting to figure out the offense. The ground game is so very important to what they're trying to do. It was supposed to be, a focal point coming in, and now they fully realized the quarterback is going to be a problem. Jalen Milroe only threw it a dozen times last week in a victory. And you may look at the rushing yards. 54th nationally is horrible, and 104th in passing yards is really bad. No doubt. 52nd in scoring. Yet they've played Texas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, some good football teams in there. And they still managed to blow Mississippi State 40-17, Ole Miss 24-10, and of course the loss to Texas. But they still put some points up. And I think when we look back at the end of the year, we're going to say 24 points on Texas. Maybe that wasn't the worst thing, particularly when we know your weakness is at the quarterback position. Now, with that being said, we know that Texas A&M and Alabama has resulted in 2 victories going the Aggies' way in the past 4 years now, it is, I believe. And this is something to obviously keep an eye on. I think the line's now shrunk. I see a point floating out here now. And the Aggies now, they've struggled, certainly had their struggles, but they're 4-1 now. They're too good to not be ranked. They brought in the number 1 recruiting class last year. We're seeing these guys as sophomores starting to make an impact here. Wins over Arkansas, Auburn, Louisiana Monroe, and New Mexico. The defensive line in particular, where they brought a number of these top recruits in, they're one of the best in generating pressure in the entire country, 14.8%. That's several percentage points better than number 2 Penn State. So they're looking very good there, and they obviously, I read off the numbers earlier against Arkansas last week and the damage they did there. 20 sacks on the year so far by that unit. Sherman Turner on the defensive line has 3.5 sacks. Algarian Cooper has 3 sacks. Walter Nolan has 3 sacks. And it's just being spread out all over the place for this particular group. And they're getting a lot of pressure. And that could be a problem for Alabama's offensive line that was supposed to be a strength and has struggled a bit. And they're going to have some problems. Now, again, deep throws have been an asset and an ally to Jalen Monroe, hitting on a few deep shots when they do need to move the football. And we see that the Aggies have done a pretty good job on limiting those opportunities as well. They are currently top 10 in passing defenses right now. They actually give up a little bit more on the ground, but that's not saying much. That's still less than 100 yards per average, but that's probably where Alabama's going to have better success. And that's certainly possible. Now for Texas A&M, Max Johnson, of course, in at quarterback there with Wingman out, and he might have a decent job in the pocket. But Alabama can generate pressure too and really limit what the Aggies want to do on offense as well. So this could be a low-scoring, torrid affair, just doing a lot on the ground. 46 is the over-under I'm seeing right now in College Station, and this is going to be a grinder, but a very good game to watch with big repercussions. A Texas A&M win would be big. Heck, even an Alabama win I think would really be big, because Texas A&M could still win this division, or Alabama could really put themselves in the driver's seat. These are probably the 2 best teams in the, I get my divisions messed up, whatever division of the SEC this is, with Georgia coming out of the other side. This is a huge game. Now, the other one I have in here is actually at 3 o'clock on the stupid Pac-12 network, while that still exists. It's UCLA, who's also unranked, and they're hosting number 13 Washington State. Again, Washington State, a good defense in the way that it's an above-average group overall. And they've got good wins so far. Oregon State and Wisconsin, but not a championship-level team. UCLA has a great defense in its own right. Dante Moore getting some real action, taking over the starting position, but has had struggles. Took an off week, now came back, and they're at home. Washington State's coming in there. It would be fantastic if both quarterbacks played really well and we got something out of both guys, but that's a little bit yet to be seen. So this, again, could be points on both sides or a little bit lower scoring. It's a 60.5 point over-under. I think that's way too high. UCLA is favored by a field goal, but this is still a huge game. UCLA has already 0-1 in conference play, you have to remember, but this is another big domino in the massive Pac-12 race. You kind of think Oregon State and UCLA are kind of going to fall. I'm sorry, Washington State and Oregon State are going to be kind of the middle pack. Possibly Utah if they can't get Cam Rising back, even with that defense. And right now you're thinking USC, even with their defensive issues, and Oregon and Washington at the top. But where does UCLA fit into that? Lots of games to still go, but this is one of the several big games coming up in the back half of the schedule to help determine the Pac-12. Your channel flipper games in the afternoon, 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. ESPN will be playing number 14 North Carolina hosting Syracuse. Tar Heels are 4-0. Syracuse is 4-1 coming off a Clemson loss. North Carolina got some great news. They might have a new number 1 receiver coming in. Of course, we had the big scandal, multiple transfers due to a number of reasons for Tez Walker this past offseason, trying to make it into North Carolina finally, and it was declined. He can't play. That's what they said, basically. After a lot of discussion back and forth, and we didn't learn that until, I think, kickoff of week 1. And that was supposed to be it. Tez Walker transferred multiple times. I believe once was due to injury, once due to a coach being fired. I don't think the guy's played any college football at all. Just unfortunate incidents due to circumstances out of his control that's caused him to transfer. So he says, okay, I'll go play in North Carolina. Let's do it. And the NCAA declined his waiver. Well, for some unknown reason, after declining it 5 weeks ago, they, I guess, looked at it again after a massive outrage, would be my guess. And they said, yeah, you can play. You can play. We'll reinstate you. We'll approve your transfer. You're good to go. So this week, he can hit the field, I believe, and he's supposed to be really good. So he was expected to be the top receiving options for Drake May. So North Carolina should have him on the field. And Syracuse, speaking of wide receivers, has got a lot of guys banged up. I think that was part of the problem that they had struggles against Clemson last week. They run their quarterback a hell of a lot. Schrader, what's his name here? Garrett Schrader. There we go. Got it. They say it on the broadcast, and I tune it out sometimes when I'm watching 8 games at once. But good quarterback for the most part. Does a lot of running around. He's got 6 touchdowns and 340 yards on the ground this season already. But they might have some struggles against North Carolina. But 9.5-point favorites, 59.5-point over-under. Drake May might have a new weapon. His stats aren't eye-popping this season. They've had some struggles to kind of get things going. But they are undefeated in the hunt for the ACC championship. They've actually had I don't want to say difficult schedule, but there haven't been any cupcakes. Remember, they beat South Carolina, they beat Appalachian State, they beat Minnesota, they beat Pitt, and it's very possible none of those teams make bowl games, right? Or maybe all of them finish, a hum-ho record. But still, there's no cupcakes in that particular schedule for North Carolina. So Syracuse, arguably one of the easier teams on the slate, despite being a 4-1 team. So we'll see what North Carolina can cook up here. They have home dates against Miami next week, followed by a tasty one in Virginia, which is one of the easier games on the schedule. Speaking of Clemson, they're the 3:30 on the ACC network. They didn't exactly lay the pounding to Syracuse last week. It was a steady margin. What was it, 31-14? But they'll get an opportunity to at least mark up another decent-looking team in the box score, a 3-1 Wake Forest team that really just isn't awesome this year. But they'll get a shot at them. They are pretty big favorites, 21 points over the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Remember, Clemson is now 1-2 in conference play. They really can't afford any more losses here. Wake Forest, their last time out, lost to Georgia Tech by 14. That Georgia Tech team that was just beat to death by Bowling Green. So just keep that in the back of your head. 4 o'clock on Fox, they will have Kansas at 4-1 hosting Central Florida at 3-2. I still like watching these teams. I still like watching both of them. If their quarterbacks are playing, and that's a big question mark right now. I think Miles Plumlee will finally be back for the Central Florida Knights, and Jaden Daniels is sometimes day-to-day or pulled right before the game kicks off. Hard to tell sometimes for the Kansas Jayhawks. But if both of those guys are in, then we'll get the full version of both of these teams. Central Florida, 2 losses in Big 12 play, unfortunately, with a backup quarterback. He hasn't played horrible, but certainly a team that was thought to maybe be a surprise team in the Big 12. Not quite a TCU run, but maybe somewhere close to those lines. It looks like maybe there's some expectation that Plumlee will play. I see the lines completely flipped here towards Central Florida by a couple points rather than Kansas. I hope Jaden Daniels is able to play as well, but that could be a fun game. Over-unders in the 60s. Notable games in the afternoon window. 2 o'clock, one of these weird start times. The CW network has NC State hosting Marshall. I don't know a whole lot about Marshall this year, admittedly. Not great. Didn't do a ton of research. But NC State has sucked. That I know. NC State has freaking sucked. I've wasted way too much time watching them. They've got a pretty good defense just across the board, but the offense has just been atrocious. Like some of these ACC teams have going. It's just bad. And the line's 6.5. Marshall's 4-0. Brennan Armstrong, again, the Virginia transfer who moved over to that NC State, has more interceptions than touchdowns. They lost to Louisville in a low-scoring affair. They were pounded by Notre Dame. They squeaked by UConn and Virginia, which is not a good look. And Marshall managed to beat Virginia Tech, which is not a complete doormat this year, like they have been in some previous seasons. Cam Francher, their quarterback, is completing 71% of his passes, although he doesn't seem to be a big playmaker. Sam Burton's got 4 sacks on the defensive line. So I think that Marshall is a good football team, legitimately. Third down conversion rate on offense is not very good. So it's possible we just have another low-scoring affair. But in saying that, it's possible the Marshall pulls an upset there. Florida State, ranked number 5, they'll be hosting Virginia Tech. You didn't see them play last week because they didn't play last week. But they'll be giving it back, and they'll be playing Virginia Tech. They're favored big time in this game. But again, Virginia Tech has at least a couple teeth this year. That is the ABC game. Iowa will be hosting Purdue at 3:30 on the Peacock Network. Iowa's 2.5-point favorites, 38.5 point over-under. Not a whole lot to say here. Cade McNamara's probably out. And that's about it. Iowa. You're probably not actually watching this game. 4 o'clock, SEC Network. Florida's hosting Vandy. Florida has a lot of potential and has not been showing it. They're still heavy favorites over Vanderbilt, though. I believe they switched quarterbacks, Vanderbilt finally, off of Swan, because they've had so many issues there. So Vanderbilt trying to hang on to something. Remember, they beat Kentucky and Florida back-to-back weeks last season. Also, the 2 o'clock game on ESPN+, Temple hosting UTSA. UTSA, even at 1-3, is favored on the road at Temple. No Frank Harris. I don't know if he's out for the season or what's going on there for UTSA, but that really sucks. They're still favored big time against Temple there. The quarterbacks they'll be playing, Owen McCowan will be starting for Temple, son of Josh McCowan of the former NFL, certainly the Cardinals, and he was teammates there with Kurt Warner. And his son, EJ Warner, will be starting for UTSA, the Roadrunners. So there you go. That's your afternoon window with 20 games, 4 ranked teams, and just plenty of other teams hovering around the top 40 to 50 worth keeping an eye on there. Your evening slate's a little lighter as well, 15 games, but 8 top 25 teams and 2 more top 25 matchups. I've got your top watches. Georgia number 1 hosting number 20 Kentucky on ESPN at 7 o'clock. Again, Georgia struggled last week to finally put away Auburn on the road. This time they're at home. They're 14.5 points. Man, they really get you with that hook there, don't they? Sitting at 14.5 point favorites at a chilly 65 degrees in Athens, Florida, with a 45.5 point over-under. Kentucky makes a lot of explosive plays. They certainly sit up there in the rankings according to TeamRankings.com. Thank you for the stats. And Georgia seems to be a lot of Brock Bowers, and that's about it. Again, they're still not unveiling their full weapons arsenal. They haven't had to yet, but this is probably the first time, not that they didn't have to pull some things off for Auburn last week, but it was still Auburn, and the turnovers were not what they'd planned for on the offensive side of the ball, so we still got to see what Carson Beck looks like uncorked. There's still things in the repertoire, I think, that have not been fully opened up by Kirby Smart yet. And this could be the game, maybe. Kentucky should be able to hang around, I would think. Georgia still isn't particularly impressive, putting pressure on quarterbacks that we're used to. They're not even in the top 20 rankings right now as far as pressure rate. So I would expect them to kind of figure some of that out as we're moving forward. Kentucky had an awful offensive line last year. It's looking better this season, but still, they had a transfer quarterback of their own, the former NC State quarterback, Devin O'Leary, who's 10 touchdowns, 5 picks, 57% completion percentage, not particularly impressive. Ray Davis, the running back there, 7.8 yards per carry on 76 attempts and 8 touchdowns. Can he move the ball on the defensive line, even if there's not a lot of pressure? Remains to be seen. So, again, expect Georgia to probably comfortably put things away in the end here, but it could be interesting to see how we get to that result. Louisville's ranked 25th. I don't think they're very good. They're hosting number 10 Notre Dame on ABC, and the Irish are favored by less than a touchdown. Louisville also hitting a lot of big plays and is one of the best offenses in the country. But listen to the teams that they have played. Georgia Tech, who they beat 39-34. They trailed big in the first half. Murray State 56-0. Indiana 21-14. Good defense there. Boston College 56-28 in a shootout, and that NC State team 13-10 on the road last week. Which of those teams do you look at and you say, yeah, that might be comparable to what Notre Dame can do defensively, or what they can offer in Sam Hartman and Esme at running back versus what Louisville can put together? So my first thought in staring at this is Notre Dame should win this by a couple of touchdowns at least, but there certainly is some credence to playing Ohio State and then playing at Duke and now having to play at a Louisville team that's fired up and thinks that they can beat you. So, neutral field, not having to play 3 tough games in a row. I think Notre Dame does win by a couple scores, but this could be interesting. This could legitimately be interesting. Louisville wins. Presumably it could be a shootout, but I'd presume we end up with the defense doing a decent job against Notre Dame, and they're able to put up a lot of points, a lot more than Notre Dame's given up so far. So far it's been 14, 17, 17, 24, 3, and 3. That's what Notre Dame's given up so far. So I don't expect something too high, but it'd be Louisville probably finding a way to slow down the run game and limit the damage that Sam Hartman is able to do as well, while moving the ball on a very good defense. So a 6-0 Louisville team and a 2-loss Notre Dame team halfway through the season doesn't quite sound right. Could be interesting though. That's the ABC game, 7:30. The 7 o'clock is Kentucky at Georgia on ESPN. Your channel flippers. I got 3 in this category. Arguable though. Minnesota's hosting number 2 Michigan, 7:30 NBC. Michigan should win handily. They're only favored by 18.5. That actually seems quite low. Minnesota is just not good. They're not good at all. Don't have much belief in the offense. They've lost to North Carolina. They've lost to Northwestern. They slugged it out with Louisiana to a 35-24 win last week. They scraped by Nebraska. Just not a lot of belief in the quarterback here, whose name I cannot pronounce. 58% completion, 5 touchdowns, 4 picks. They have a couple good backs in Darius Taylor and Sean Tyler, but just not a lot of belief in the Golden Gophers at all. They're averaging 24 points per game. 24 points per game, 42% conversion on third down, and the defense is not anything special either. Again, I think they'll be lucky to make a bowl game at this particular point. I'd still like to see Michigan continue to throw the football and show at least a few things on offense, even though they don't necessarily need all the tools to win comfortably. It'd be nice to see that they still have them and don't have to whip them out for 2 games a year when it's absolutely necessary. Like, let's practice some things in real game time. Ole Miss ranked 16th, giving up 1 billion points a game, but also able to put up a few of their own. They're hosting Arkansas at 7:30 on the SEC Network. They're favored by close to a dozen, low 60s for the over-under. Middling class SEC football. Very fun. That's about it for this one. Wyoming will be hosting Fresno State, who's ranked 24th at 8 o'clock on Fox. This is a Fox game in the evening? I guess I didn't realize that. Fresno's favored by 5.5. That is what we call Wyoming respect. The Cowboys are 4-1, 1-0 in the Mountain West. They did scrape by New Mexico last week. They just barely made it by Appalachian State. Of course, beat Texas Tech, beat Portland State barely, and hung in with Texas for quite a while there. But this is a good football team. Decent quarterback in Andrew Paisley. And the defense has really caused problems for some folks. So this could be a lower scoring game. Fresno, though, known for putting up some points. The over-under's 44. So I guess that's not really looking like in the cards. Mikey Keene, over 1,400 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 4 picks. Been a great quarterback. Been a great year for Fresno State so far. Purdue, East Washington, Arizona State, Kent State, and Nevada have all been bodied. The only close game was really Purdue. Took them a minute to get past Nevada the other week, but other than that, just a great job. Mikey Keene, 69% completion percentage as well. The defense looks pretty good. They're averaging 36 points per game and 50% conversion on third down. Just a good football team in Fresno. They might not just be have the 24 name next to their number for the AP poll. They might genuinely be like a top 25 team. Like, they might beat half the Power 5 teams if lined up against them. When you look at some of these teams that don't have a quarterback or don't have an offense or struggle on defense, like Fresno State seems to be a legitimately good football team. Your notable games in the evening start at 6:30 on the Pac-12 network. They've squirreled away Colorado this week. They're playing at Arizona State. They're favored by 4, which sounds pretty freaking awful because Arizona State has been atrocious. They were off this past week, but they needed it. They lost to Cal by 3. They lost to USC by 14. They were surprisingly in that game. But they were thumped by Fresno by 29, by Oklahoma State, who wasn't very good, by 14. They only beat Southern Utah so far this season. That was by 3. They've had 50,000 injuries on that team. Hopefully some guys got healthy. But Colorado favored by 3 at Arizona State. Doesn't look so good. I think they've got some push on that defensive line. Possibly that could be part of the problem, is that Shadir Sanders might be under a bit of pressure there by Arizona State, who's currently 36th in pressure rate, which isn't nothing. So might have to watch out for that if you get the Pac-12 network. I can't believe they took Deion Sanders away. Miami is back. They are ranked 17th. They're at 8 o'clock on the ACC network. Well, why haven't you seen Miami recently? Well, because after they knocked off Texas A&M, they played Bethune-Cookman, or maybe just Bethune, blew them out, blew out Temple, took a bye week, and now they're playing a god-awful Georgia Tech team. That's why. Coming up, North Carolina and Clemson. So keep an eye on Miami. Also at 8 o'clock, ESPN2, Baylor will be hosting Texas Tech. I know both teams have losing records. The bottom half of the Big 12 looks like it's going to be real bad, but these are a couple teams that could be trending upwards. Texas Tech is a quarterback down with Shaw back out. Shaw, can never pronounce that right. Quarterback down. Baylor a quarterback up with Shapen back in. We'll see. One of them will be moving a little bit closer to 500. Also in the Big 12 at 8 o'clock on FS2, Iowa State will be hosting TCU as the Horned Frogs, favored by almost a touchdown on the road, are slowly trying to crawl back to the top there. They're 3-2 and 1-1 in the Big 12 so far. And finally, this week, your late night slate is very light. Only 2 games. Pac-12 Network is stealing the 10 o'clocker. Cal hosting number 15 Oregon State as they continue to try and keep things rolling after knocking off Utah. They are 4-1, 1-1 in the Pac-12. California's 3-2, 1-1 in the Pac-12. It'd be a big win for them, but they are underdogs by 9.5 points from what I'm seeing right now. Of course, blown up by Washington and lost a close one by Auburn. That was really the tough loss. Squeaked by Idaho, squeaked by Arizona State, and beat North Texas as well. So this is a team that is looking for to at least hang in the game against Oregon State, while the Beavers are looking to move to 2-1 in conference play. 10:30 for everybody. ESPN. Number 9 USC will be hosting Arizona, a team that they escaped by a touchdown last year, a team that Washington escaped by a touchdown last week, a team that's slowly been coached up and brought around here by Mr. Jed Fish, who's been doing a pretty darn good job of getting this team back on its feet. And don't necessarily expect them again to win, especially if Jaden Delora's out. But you'll get another look at their young quarterback there and what they might be able to do on the defensive end, really. And could be a field day for Caleb Williams as well. But man, Arizona's defense might be something. Might be something there. That's a good late night game, quite frankly. Number 9 USC hosting Arizona. So now your categories. Your must watch. Quite frankly, there's 2 big ones on the docket. You can tune in at noon to the Texas-Oklahoma Red River rivalry game on ABC. And then flip on over at 3 o'clock to CBS and watch Texas A&M take on Alabama. Those are both huge games. Your Audible is in the evening slate. If Georgia starts to get a handle on Kentucky, if Notre Dame, Louisville is kind of a slog, flip on over to Ole Miss and Arkansas on the SEC network. I'd expect there to be a lot of points again in that particular ball game. Check in. I've got the Texas Tech Baylor game also in the evening slate again there. 28-point second-half comeback against UCF last week for Baylor. And this game, I think, is a push right now. Texas Tech trying to build back the good faith in those who believe they'd be a top 4 team in the Big 12 this year. And we'll see what they can do on the road again. Small screen starlet. I stay in the evening slate with Wyoming hosting Fresno State. It's the best game on the slate, obviously. Fresno State looking like a real good shot at the not the Power 5, the New Year's Day Bowl, one of the Big 5 bowl games there, having a real shot at it, and Wyoming a good opponent on the road. Underrated game, I've got Kansas at UCF, particularly if we have quarterbacks playing on this one on Fox. That's great in the afternoon window to flip over to, and even if these teams aren't 2 of the very best in the Big 12, they could be 2 really great teams to watch square off against each other. And your late night snack is an easy one, USC hosting Arizona on ESPN in the 10:30 time slot. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Watch Guide this week. I will talk at you later. Enjoy your football. Bye.